our discussion here. We really appreciate that. And we're especially pleased to have Winfield Zell with us. And I'll introduce Winfield now. And as I'm doing that, I was really quite taken by the film. Do have a description of the film here that I neglected to share with you at the beginning of our evening. I'm just going to do that now, if I may, please. Choice of Weapons, inspired by Gordon Parks, explores the enduring legacy of photographer, writer, composer, activist, and filmmaker, an extraordinarily talented man. Gordon Parks and spotlights his visionary work and its impact on the next generation of artists. Through the lens of three contemporary photographers, we see Gordon's legacy come to light. Devin Allen, whose photographed Baltimore Uprising of the Freddie Gray protest was featured on the cover of Time magazine. Latoya Ruby Frazier, who for 5 years followed the Flint, Michigan water crisis, and most recently Breonna Taylor's family for Vanity Fair, and Jamal Shabazz, whose photographs on the streets of New York form a visual history of the hip-hop hero while simultaneously presenting affirming images for his community. And again, I would encourage you to go to the foundation and check out more information. With no further delay, let's welcome Winfield Zell, who will be sharing with us his insights. Winfield is the founder and CEO of Obsidian Creative Studios, and I'll leave it to Winfield to describe what Obsidian Creative Studios does and what they're all about. It's an incredible organization. Winfield brings close to 25 years of experience in film and TV production and storytelling. As a writer, editor, director, and producer, Winfield has a proven track record in the independent film scene in Seattle, Atlanta, and throughout the South. In fact, Winfield is in Alabama at this moment, and he'll tell us about that. The consummate storyteller and architect of Content 360 ecosystem, his experience includes extensive work in the corporate arena with a client list over the years that has included numerous companies, including Microsoft, Regents, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delta Regional Authority, just to name a few. Obsidian Creative Studios has garnered acclaim working with organizations such as Acres of Ancestry, that is Justice for Black Farmers, ASHORCA, a worldwide network of fellows, and the Safe House Black History Museum, which is dedicated to preserving the legacy of the civil rights movement. And in talking with Winfield yesterday, he made me aware of another organization that he's involved with called Beyond Baseball. And Gordon will tell us about that too, if he wishes. So, Gordon, welcome to Meaningful Movies Port Townsend. We're absolutely delighted that you're with us this evening, and thank you for taking time. And Gordon, I'm going to ask you the obvious question and say, how has Gordon Parks influenced your life and your work?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me here. Such an important film. I mean, every time I watch it, I see something new or I get pulled in deeper. And really the way Gordon Parks has influenced my work is, truly as a storyteller. The reason that I am a filmmaker is when I saw Spike Lee's film, Do the Right Thing. And as you saw in the film, he was a huge and heavy influence on Spike Lee. So even through just that sphere of influence, if you will, me seeing Spike Lee's film Do the Right Thing and the imagery and the story content in that and walking out of the theater of filmmaker that day, I believe, is a direct, a direct connection back to Gordon Parks. And, as I was watching this, his composition and his use of lighting was just something that was so as much a part of the character of the picture and of the image as anything else, So I believe, so like I said, I would say through Spike Lee and his influence on myself and Gordon's influence on him, that's kind of how it reached down to me.
Oh, and Winfield, as you are, you're very accomplished in your own right. I knew very little about Gordon Parks, and so the film has been a real education for me. But I was really struck about how multi-talented he was, and what a work ethic. A writer, an actor, a musician, and all, and a director, and a host of, let alone a photographer. And I'm wondering if perhaps you might comment upon how those various genres interact with one another, and inspire yourself, because you do many of those things as well, and inspired Gordon Parks.
Well, I really believe at the core of it that we're storytellers, and so when you look at photography, which if you think of, Gordon Parks' autobiography, as well as the play on the name of this film, Choice of Weapons, the camera was a choice, screenplay was a choice, music is a choice of how to express the stories and the emotions that you're trying to convey, whether it be, I think that was another thing, is the diversity of things that he did. So whether it be, the civil, Jim Crow, Alabama, or high fashion with Gloria Vanderbilt. I mean, he had this sense of authenticity that was a stream throughout, which was him being a storyteller. So I believe, when he touched the camera and it was doing 24 frames, a second, then he did it on the big screen. When he needed a soundtrack for that imagery, he also brought that from himself as well. So, definitely influential to me. I've always thought of music as another character, even in my storytelling. And so, being multi-dimensional in how you tell your story is just something that, I feel like I'm blessed to do. I think a lot of us have that in us. Not everyone gets a chance to express it or to fulfill it through all the different genres. But, not only did Gordon do that, but he definitely, gives me an argument if somebody ever say, hey, man, do you think you're doing too much? I don't know if I'm doing enough,
It makes an exciting day when you get up and go to work every day. One thing that I remember, just on a personal note, I was in New York in 2002 or 3, I think, and I managed to persuade my son, who's now 42, to fly out to New York to join me for a few days. I'd gone there for a conference, and so Matt came out. And so I asked him what he wanted to do. And I was thinking the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I was thinking Times Square and the Statue of Liberty. He says, I want to go see Shaft. And that was the new film, the new version of that film that came out. And I think that was in 2019 or 2021 in there someplace. And I was really struck by that. And that was my introduction to Gordon Parks. And now I'm very eager to share this with my son, Matt, and remind him of what an extraordinary choice he made. I don't know that he understood all that Gordon Parks was about at that time, but I know that he liked the film. I think for the many reasons that people are today about the role of a Black York, and I think it was probably filmed in New York. And in early days, that was, the first version came out in 40 years ago, I think, Winfield, of my memory.
Yeah, probably around there. Don't make me dig deep for when exactly it was, but definitely in the in the 70s. I mean, I was born in 68, so I'm 53. So the 70s were formative years. I had my afro. Don't let these locks fool you. I still got that afro in me. Imagery was so important, for those times, because that was, we're coming off of the 60s, so imagery looked a whole lot different, and all of a sudden, there was this empowerment in the image being there, and really to bring it forward to today, there's still that struggle to find an authentic image, or even for creators, especially African Americans, to find an outlet to reach the audience, and so that we can get some authentic imagery out there and authentic storytelling. And so I think to see, Gordon Parks and even the other photographers that were highlighted. I mean, Ava DuVernay. It's interesting. I just met her sister yesterday. We were at the Legacy Museum. Brian Stevenson was in the film, and we was at the Legacy Museum in Montgomery yesterday. And I was telling her what an influence that her sister has on us filmmakers. Watching her career and watching her style of storytelling. So, it's once again, man, a great piece of filmmaking all the way around.
Go ahead, Peg.
I have a question or an observation, I guess, and then a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was really struck by the narrative quality of almost every one of those images that we saw. I mean, even the ones that on the surface maybe looked like a portrait. I can't remember her name, but the woman who was the cleaning woman.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Last name was Watson.
Mrs. Watson. That even in his portraits, there's a story there that is so clear. And I'm wondering if that comes from that relationship that he developed with the subjects of his photography, or was it the way he set up the image, the composition? Can you speak to that?
Well, I think definitely his technique of, getting to know the subject, as a part of telling the story. Oftentimes I believe it said that he would, you spend 3 months with someone, that's a lot of time when you're taking one frame at a time, or when he was with the gangster, as they called him. And he asked him one day, hey man, are you ever use your camera? He's like, oh, I will, and I think that speaks to the patience, right? Which then goes into the other part of your question is, getting the right image. And now, working with photographers, and I see a few folks on here that have some experience, Dr. Paul Jackson in the house. You find that, they shoot more than one picture. There's one that we see, but there's a number of pictures around it. But having the patience to let the moment develop itself, I think that's one piece of it. But then also having the intentionality, right, to command when the moment comes, because he did it both ways. Like you said, he directed it as well, because, to think that you could get the perfect image every time and it's just a magic moment. That's a, romantic way to look at it, but it's also takes a skill, and that skill of patience, that skill of intentionality. And I think that skill of connection is where Gordon Parks, that's where his magic is. And that's how it comes out in the imagery. At least that's my take on it.
Oh, thank you. That was.
I'm not a photographer, but I was inspired when it was made mention of in the film that it doesn't have to be perfect. None of my iPhone photos are perfect, but I did take some inspiration from that. Winfield, you mentioned or drew our attention to Dr. Jackson. Perhaps you can introduce us to him, and let's hear from Dr. Jackson.
Yes, well, I hope Brother Paul don't mind me putting him on the spot, but a fellow documentarian and also a consummate interviewer, someone who definitely understands and recognizes the power of storytelling through, experiences, through others' experiences. I would hesitate to even guess to tell you how many conversations that Dr. Jackson has had with people spanning across different sectors, different industries, different stories, generations, and the such. And so that's who Dr. Paul Jackson is, and I can let him speak to that more succinctly. How you doing, sir?
No. Well, the systemic racism continues, and and it's incredibly important that it be filmed, that it be documented, that the story that both of you gentlemen have been talking about, it's all in Winfield. I've learned over the years that it's all in the story. It's and no matter how that story is rendered, whether in writing, as a documentary, through music, through poetry, the stories are the perhaps the best way to convey what's going on. Dr. Jackson, if you were to make a film in Winfield, what approach would you take, Winfield, to documenting, to showing, and bringing attention to the heinous act that happened at the construction site in Seattle a short while ago?
Go ahead, Paul. I'll let you take that first.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And and I think too, I mean, to build and really compliment what Dr. Jackson is saying, is to really get that story out there, and the authentic story. Because, this is a human experience, right? And that's where the connection comes to everybody. It doesn't matter, what your experience is, whether it's down south. I mean, I'm down here. Ray Anthony Hinton spoke yesterday to the baseball team from Baseball Beyond Borders. And, him being on death row, the person next to him on death row was a Klans member. And I think he writes about this in his book. And his name was Henry. And Henry was raised by, I think his grandfather was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. And he subsequently, like at 19 or 20, went out and committed a heinous murder, got caught, put in prison. So they're right next door. As he said, he lived next door to him for all of these years, for 15 years. And this Henry was subsequently executed. But what he said was that the person that was executed was not the person that they arrested. And he said they had had many years of conversations that had come to realize that they had more in common than they did not. And I remember when he said he first made a breakthrough is he asked him, he said, "Why do you hate me so much?" And he said that Henry was like, you know, he started talking about, well, Black people. He said, "No, I didn't ask you about Black people. Why do you hate me so much?" And Henry went again and started talking about Black people. And he said, pushed him again. He said, no. Why is it that you hate me? And he finally got the answer that he knew he would get. And Henry said, "Well, man, I don't know you." And he said, "Exactly." You know, and so I believe that therein lies why we can touch people with other people's stories. Because, you know, I was talking to somebody about this weekend, and I said, because once you hear someone's story, it's hard not to have at least an opening for compassion. You know, and I think that's where the key is in telling things like that.
Oh, indeed. Yeah. And Winfield, what was the book that you just referenced that was written?
You know, I'm going to have to look that up. In fact, my son said, "Trey, look up what Ray Anthony Hinton's book is called for me, okay?" Yeah, I'll find that out. And even though I'm saying that, I already know, man, I see Dr. Jackson down there already on the move because he's been keeping us like with Ella Mae Watson, the lady's name there, who we were trying to remember that Gordon did first, the first portrait of her. So, you know, I know the scholar down there is working with us. Yeah. What's it called, Trey? Oh, and the book is called The Sun Does Shine.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Yeah,
I found life, freedom, and justice. Yeah.
It's good to have that technical assistance nearby. So
yes, indeed, man. Yeah, it keeps me honest.
Yeah, I think we all have an ambivalent relationship with Mr. Google. You know, I have a question for both of you. And this comes up a lot, I suppose, but I'd really like to hear from you, Winfield, and also from you, Dr. Jackson. How can we go about ensuring that everything that's done is not lost? There is so much social media, so many documentaries, great opportunities in many respects for documentarians. But and I have a question about that too that I want to ask both of you as Black artists. But how can we keep from losing the focus on the work that you're doing, for example, the focus on anti-racism work and in this blitz of information and that we're receiving 24 hours a day?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that here's where we can, how you say we had that ambivalent relationship, right? Here's where I believe we can embrace technology. I mean, even what's happening right now, you know, I mean, right here as we sit here, I'm in Alabama, you know, you guys over there on the West Coast, in various places, and we're able to have this dialogue. Like, let's use technology to be what it can be for us as well, not just what they've defined it for us as they try to deliver us these services and this content, which is cool, you know. But let's also think about, you know, like we talk about my son there who watched the film with me, who's also up and coming DP. He actually was my DP yesterday and last week in Jackson. But just the fact that we got that information at our fingertips, you know, I don't know how many of us are Star Trek fans, but I mean, it's like having the computer who can access any information. And so if we embrace that piece of it, then let's start getting, I mean, you know, I was talking about work with the Safe House Museum with you, Patrick, and that's one of the things that we talked about as we interviewed foot soldiers. It's like, let's put this in an archive. You know, we were at Delta State and they were repatriating some of the recordings of the old blues singers, the children singing, and they were bringing it back to the community. And I think those are the things. And then let's also then remember that technology is just one facet of experiencing something. And let's go to Mississippi, right? I've been to, where Emmett Till's, to Money, Mississippi, where the store is, been to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, been to Amzie Moore's house in Mississippi. Those are the things, that being there, the Lorraine Motel, in Memphis, Tennessee, where Dr. King was killed, things like that. But, Harlem, where Duke Ellington and all the Harlem Renaissance and all the artists, let's go and experience those places. And when you put those two together, once again, we've been talking about magic tonight. That's where that magic goes down. What you think about that, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Winfield, this I talked about.
Yeah, man. And I think, also too, what Dr. Jackson said strongly is he documented his work. I think that's a big thing as well. We need to start documenting our work and the process of our work so that those things that can traditionally, just like this documentary we just screened tonight, those techniques can be added in, because oftentimes it is an inciting incident that brings someone to another level of seriousness about expression. Like the gentleman in Baltimore with the Freddie Gray, how he was like, man, I'm just tired of seeing this. I just want to, I want to express myself through that. So I think, man, that's definitely, Paul, that's a truly, poignant point about documenting your work. Like when you do, because this is the research. Oral history is as strong, especially coming from our culture, is a strong way to pass things on and to preserve things. And come on, we all got these devices now that have great cameras, that have great editing. So, to fortify, take serious that piece of it, as you would anything else. And people can do it on a family level now.
Now your iPhone, excuse me, Dr. Jackson, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, with these, we're all documentarians. And
That's right. Absolutely. And, life is worth documenting, as we've seen.
And the good stuff, and both of you gentlemen do good stuff. The good stuff will emerge. It will make its way.
Absolutely.
Make its way to the audience for which it's intended. Well, gentlemen, and Winfield in particular, thank you for taking time to be with us this evening, and your good work. We'll look forward to seeing more of it. And also, Dr. Jackson, thank you for joining in this evening. And I think we'll leave it there with, again, thanks to all of our viewers for joining in, and stay tuned for the second Monday of August, and we'll have a film for you. So again, thank you, everyone, and good evening.
Thank you.